Live. I'm just going to blabber for a second just to see if we are actually live, because otherwise we'll cut off some words of wisdom from today's guest. And I think we probably are live. So, hello, ladies and gentlemen of Facebook, YouTube, and wherever else we are. I lose track. Um, we are talking about insurance today with Ashlin Hadden. Ashlin, great to have you back on the show. Thank you for coming on live with us.
Thanks for having me. Always great.
Yeah, always enjoy our conversations. So we are going to be going recording the podcast in a second. If you're watching live or on the restream, if you are on the replay rather, if you're watching live, feel free to pop any questions or comments you have about Amazon insurance. Not should I start a retail arbitrage business? That's not relevant. But if it's relevant to today's discussion, pop them in, and we can always weave them into the conversation. Occasionally, people ask stuff that's relevant or interesting during the actual show, but also after the show. If you're watching on the replay, do feel free to ask questions, and Ashlyn or I come in and try and answer them. So with that said, Ashlyn, you get to record our podcast as a podcast, qua podcast, as they say in Latin. Here we go then. Right. Record this sucker here. What am I doing with the view settings? Let me try this. Okay, here we go. Ladles and jelly spoons, boys and girls, welcome back to the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be for 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon private label sellers. And specifically today, we are talking about insurance. Not something most people get excited about, but it's one of those things where you just ignore it for a while. It seems like a non-entity, and then suddenly it's really, really important, and it can shut down your business, and then it becomes not very exciting yet. So it's one of those things we have to really take care of. And the perfect person to take care of it today for us, Ashlin Hadden, who has been an expert in and focused on delivering Amazon insurance for several years. So welcome back to the show. Good to have you back.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah,
Pleasure.
Nobody wants to talk about it until there's a claim. So
yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about it now.
Yeah, insurance is one of those things, isn't it? That everyone wants to kind of ignore it. But I think it's part of being a professional business person that you don't just deal with stuff when it becomes a crisis and your business has nearly gone down the tubes, but that you see it coming and make sure it isn't going to happen in the first place, which is hopefully what we can do for people listening. So even if you haven't had a disaster with the insurance recently, well, why don't we keep it that way for you? So that's my main sort of pitch today. So tell us about insurance on Amazon. First of all, what's the latest state of play? Do we really have to have it? Is it a big deal? Are there scary things going on? Date us up here.
It changes daily, Michael. Last week I came out and Amazon said, "Hey, we're changing this rule again, and now you have to have a $0 deductible." And then yesterday I got an email. I went and fought hard to Amazon about this whole $0 deductible. And we got an email yesterday from Amazon headquarters that said, "You win." And they removed the $0 deductible. So it's ever changing. That's why you got to follow the podcast and things like, your team to make sure that you're staying up on the news. So as of today, here's the new rules. If you are selling $10,000 a month in consecutive sales, then you have to have a general liability policy with product liability. So what that means is you have to cover what you do or say as a business and what your products do to harm someone else. So let's say I'm selling this lip balm and I say this lip balm in my listing, this lip balm is going to make your lips look so plump. And I buy this and it doesn't make my lips plump and I sue you for false advertisement. That's going to be general liability. That's what you do or say as a business. Then if I put this lip balm on and now I have allergic reaction, my lips swell and I have bumps and all of these kinds of things, that's product liability. That's going to be what your products do to harm someone else. So Amazon came out and said, you have to have both of these. You have to have $1 million in general liability with product liability. Then they came out and said, not only did you have to have this, but then you had to have that $0 deductible. Well, that went to the wayside yesterday. So now you don't have to have that. So you just need to have a general liability with product liability currently. If you are a pro seller selling more than $10,000 a month in sales.
Okay, a pro seller. I like that word as opposed to amateur seller. Yeah, I suppose, that's one way of putting it. Okay, so that's for most established sellers, and that is, the target listeners of the show. Although plenty of people listen who are just starting out because they get in touch with me sometimes. But so is that it? It's as simple as that.
Under that 10,000, you still should have insurance.
Okay, tell us more about that.
Amazon's
Yeah.
not going to suspend you. So still do it. If you are just a brand new seller, you should have your policy in place before you ship your first item, because that first item could be the one that causes an injury that is going to end up getting you sued. So we have a lot of sellers who say, well, I don't sell anything risky. I only sell, unrisky products. Well, we have had a claim where a guy was shipping an item. The owner of the item tripped over the box. He sued Amazon. He sued USPS, and he sued our seller. Well, if this seller didn't have insurance, they would have had to pay that out of pocket. And it was over $30,000 in legal fees. So just because you're not selling 10,000 a month, or just because you think that you're selling something risky, doesn't mean that you're not at risk for still being sued.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I think one of the things about whether you're in the frame or not is one of those questions that's decided by a judge ultimately. But just because you think you shouldn't be doesn't mean you're not. And as a CJ Rosenbaum, who I think does expert lawyer in they specialize in Amazon sellers, and he says, yeah, basically if somebody gets hurt, everybody gets sued. It's my simple version, and don't sue me, CJ, for misrepresentation. Yeah, and we're talking about the United States here, which is a famously litigious country. But just to clarify, do these things apply outside the US, or is the US the only thing that you focus on, the Amazon.com?
So you have to sell on .com. But then we can add what's called worldwide coverage, which would cover products that are shipped overseas. So it's not going to cover the .eu site. It's only going to cover the .com site, but .com shipped anywhere in the world.
Okay, so we are basically talking specifically to people who are selling in the US, wherever they're based, presumably. Okay, right.
Yep.
I mean, I would say that if you're selling in Europe and you're not sure, then this could be your spur to go and check what the policies are. I suspect they're going to be pretty similar. Amazon, like most American companies, tends to, treat the rest of the world as a sort of subsidiary of American company, and kind of makes sense.
A lot of our sellers overseas still sell on the .com platform.
Exactly.
This will cover the sales on the .com platform, even if you are based in Europe.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so there's no such thing as an unrisky product, and presumably, tell me about the cost side. The cost must be the thing that puts people off. And when you're just starting up, you've got to keep we've always got to keep an eagle eye on costs, but let alone when you're just starting up and you've got very little cash flow and a lot of outgoings. So what's the real? I mean, this is like how long a piece of string. But give me a sense here of if I'm just selling, $1,000 a month of what I think of as an unrisky product, what sort of range from and to am I going to be paying in insurance premiums?
So a lot of the price depends on what you're selling, where you're sourcing from, and how much of it you're selling. So we kind of consider a couple of buckets. So you've got your RAOA wholesalers, those who are just reselling other people's products in one bucket. Then you have more of your private label, white label in another bucket. If you're just reselling other people's products, you're not changing the branding, you're not changing the label, it's not your company. Depending on how much you're selling, you could have a policy that's $400 to $600 a year. So it could be very, very inexpensive. Some of our carriers even break it down where you can pay monthly. So you could get a policy started for like $40, $50 and have $1 million in coverage right off the gate. Now, the more you sell, the more products that you're putting into the hands of the consumers, which makes it more risky, which makes the price go up. So if you're a brand new seller, it's going to be cheaper than if you're doing $1 million in sales. So don't come to me and say, well, I'm doing $1 million in sales, Ashlin, and you told me I could do it for $40. It's not going to work that way. But if you're brand new and you don't have a whole lot of sales, you could be in that range. Now, if you're doing private label and white label, things could get more expensive. If I'm, private labeling a cup, I could be $500 a year. If I'm private labeling a fidget spinner with the knives on the end of it, that's going to be expensive. So it really depends on what you're selling and how much of it you're selling. But you could get a policy for $400 to $600 a year. And that's $1 million in general liability and $1 million in product liability.
Okay, so relative to the size of the insurance, I guess it's not that crazily expensive. I guess because the chances of you getting sued are relatively low, right? I mean, it happens and when it does, it's pretty nuclear, but then it doesn't happen that often, I guess, relative to the number of sales of cups or whatever it is we're talking
Right.
about. So tell me a bit about the relationship between the number of sales and the premium, because I guess I'm bringing it down to the numbers because I perceive that's probably the reason people don't bother doing. Either they think they don't need to, or which hopefully we've blown out of the water, or they just don't think it's affordable, which is totally understandable. So is it a linear relationship? So if I sell, 100 cups a month, it's going to cost me $50 to a month's insurance, and if I sell $5,000 a month, it's like 100 times more, or how does that
Yeah, so
work?
it's all based on the sales number. So it's not the amount of product that you're moving, it's the amount of sales that are coming in. So $100,000 in sales is going to be cheaper than $1 million in sales. So it's, again, all consistent on what you're selling and where you're sourcing from. If you're sourcing from the United States, it's going to be cheaper than if you're sourcing from China. Unfortunately, that's just the risk. Insurance goes down to like, it's so crazy. When I got into insurance, the actuaries who go through and dive into where claims are and how claims are affected, like they know down to the zip code that who has more claims. They go down to like what product has more claims, like down to like, well, we know in this zip code in Indiana, there's been $6.6 million in claims on products that are installed by the consumers. So like shower heads and things like that. Like they know so much information. And that's what they use to make your prices is what is the risk? How many claims have there been on these types of products?
Yeah. Actuaries are strange people. I happen to, one of our neighbours is an actuary because the area I live in, North London, is full of sort of people who work in the City of London. So, yeah, they have an interesting way of looking at life. I mean, he's not
They
actually an
do.
actuary anymore,
Definitely.
but he's a former actuary, I think. But he's extraordinarily blunt. Well, he's Austrian anyway, and they tend to be more blunt than most nations. But he's extraordinarily blunt when we talk about. He was an expert in life insurance, so obviously he's used to dealing with death and how long people live. He's not a great person to take to a party. Or on the other hand, he's a great person to take to a party because he'll say something shocking. It's a bit like having House. Do you ever watch House, MD?
Yes.
It's a bit like having House around it. It's great. He goes to say something inappropriate. But joking apart, I guess like they're the experts in the detail of it. And they crunch the numbers. So just to try and get a handle on this, obviously the only thing people can really do to get a proper answer is go and get a quote, which obviously we'll give them the means to do at the end of this show. But just to get a rough idea, if I sell, say, $500 worth of cups versus $5 million worth of cups, is it just literally the premium going to go up absolutely proportional to the amount of dollar sales? Is it as simple as that?
It is pretty simple as that.
Okay, fine.
They
That's
don't
worth
give
knowing.
us a rate for those types of things. So it's not like it's $1 per thousand. But if you go from 500 to a million, you're going to go from probably a $500 policy to a $5,000 policy.
Okay, so it's not exactly a linear relationship, but yeah, I mean, it sounds like common sense, and I suppose I'm trying to break it down in the way that we think as e-commerce sellers, which is kind of units and cost per unit kind of thing. And of course, that's not how it works, but I'm trying to get a handle. So what else do we need to think about with insurance? Is it as simple as you've got to have it, go and get one, and that's it, or are there other nuances we should be looking at?
I mean, obviously, go get it. Don't get suspended if you're hitting that $10,000 mark. But what I try to explain to people is be smart about the products that you're picking. A lot of sellers just pick whatever they can make a buck on. And unfortunately, you have to think about how crazy Americans are and how so happy and litigious we are. And not only what the product is used for, but how it can be misused. So, for example, I always try to say there's 6 things that I would try to stay away from if you can, unless the ROI is really great. Anything that goes on the body, your topicals and makeups and those types of things. Anything that goes in the body, stay away from supplements. Guys, unless you have an insurance policy, do not sell a supplement. So on the body, in the body, for a child, anything that's going in the mouth of a child, stay away from. Anything that goes around the neck of a child, stay away from. Anything the child can sleep on, stay away from. Don't sell bassinets and cribs and high chairs and things like that without an insurance policy. For some reason, we like our kids and we sue like crazy when our kids get hurt. Pet products, if it is a product that is ingested by a pet, I would stay away from those. And any type of like outdoor exercise equipment, resistance bands, weights, those kinds of things I would stay away from. So on the body, in the body, for a pet, for a child, or exercise equipment, stay away from those unless you have an insurance policy.
Okay, so assume we do have an insurance policy. Would you still advise staying away from them for financial reasons or for liability reasons, or what's your thinking? How does your thinking change there?
If you have insurance, that's what insurance is for. But just be smart about it. If you're going to private label a product, be darn sure that you realize that if you have a claim that you are up a creek. So just be smart about it while you're outsourcing. And I give people my Facebook message, like my Facebook account. If you're outsourcing and you see something and you're like, man, I wonder what this would do, take a picture of it, shoot it to me on Facebook and say, hey, Ashlin, what you think? And I will be very, very honest with you. I will be like, absolutely not. Stay away. Don't do it. Or yeah, I'm fine with that. Not a problem.
Great.
So be smart about it and think about how people can misuse your product.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to think about it, and it's different from the marketing way of thinking. My dad was a lawyer, so I can understand this. I would say that lawyers, and it sounds like a similar way of looking at things, have a great place in a business discussion. It's kind of the waterproofing against bad things happening stage. Probably not the person to speak to when you're first trying to start a business, full stop, because you might just never do anything. I mean, I remember making the mistake of taking the odd sort of simple contract of employment to my dad, and he just changed like 25 things. And of course, they took it back and the employers were really annoyed and it was totally unnecessary. So yeah, you can over engineer these things, can't you? But
right.
I would say that, but talking about the financial side, and insurance is a real cost, and as you say, it scales to some degree proportionate to sales, as in dollar sales or whatever it is, dollars, I guess in this case we're talking today, aren't we? Given that, I guess let's talk about the financial implications. I know that I'm talking about half the things you're talking about. I'm like, yeah, all my clients are doing that. Oh, yeah, they're doing that. Children, check. Topicals, and yeah, supplements, yes. Pet products, yes. A lot of my clients have done pretty well with that. My friend, one of the guys in the mastermind, sold a business for 7 figures recently that was all pet products. So clearly people can make a success of this. But one of the warning shots from the mastermind is that somebody got charged an astronomical premium, or at least they got quoted one for baby products that aren't actually doing big numbers. Is that something you think is going to be, how does that factor in? How does the financial side factor in of the premium cost?
So in insurance, if you're private labeling, there's things called minimum premiums. So it doesn't matter if you sell $1,000 or if you sell $1 million, there's a minimum floor that some carriers have. So in baby products, typically the minimum floor on a private label baby product is between $5,000 and $7,500. So again, depending on what carrier you use, if you're brand new, it still is going to be that floor premium. Like I said, baby products are tough. We sue all the time over baby products. So again, just make sure your ROI is there. What I try to get people to understand is like when you're fairly new at this and you see that $5,000 premium, take that $5,000 premium, divide it by the units that you're selling, and it might be $4 a unit. And if you have to increase your price by $4 a unit, then increase your price by $4 a unit. I know that's not ideal, but if you're first starting out, sometimes that's what you have to do to get through your first year. Then the next year, you might have the funds to just pay for the policy outright. But I'm telling you, going without insurance is going to bite you in the butt at some point, because attorneys in the US are over $500 an hour.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the good ones here are as well. Hours. Yeah. London-based attorneys are no cheaper, I can say. Well, a lot of the big law firms in London are now being taken over by the Americans, and they're pushing their salaries up to an insane degree, as Americans tend to when they get involved in these things. So yeah, it's no cheaper here. And the other thing I would say is this, just from a very practical point of view, most people I've ever worked with as clients, or I haven't been sued myself. My friends who sell on Amazon, most people don't get sued most of the time. However, I must know 30 people personally, never mind people I've spoken to on podcasts, who've sold their businesses. And I do know a lot of people that if they've not sorted the legals out, then their business becomes harder to sell, or there's lots of money kept back, like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
And I know a couple of businesses in that situation, and an open liability from 5 years of selling before they take it over is an extremely unattractive thing. So I would just say, from the business selling point of view, for me, it all comes down to the dollars and cents. It's funny, isn't it? You're saying this is a risk. I'm like, yeah, but tell me about the money. I mean, so for me, that's a great reason to get insurance. But equally, I take your point about, the sort of minimums. I mean, for me, what I would say is don't go into a market with a very high minimum insurance premium unless you're going to sell significant numbers of units. In other words, that's probably not something for a sort of startup business to do, right? I would suggest. And baby certainly seems to be very expensive. That's about the sort of numbers that I've heard coming back. Yeah. Tell me a bit about the other areas then that are quite popular. What about supplements or things that go in the body? Is there a sort of minimum number that you'd associate with the premium for that?
Same thing there. So you're looking at least 5,000 on a private label type of supplement. Yeah. And then to kind of piggyback on what you just said with getting out if you're selling, we do also do a lot of e-com sellers who are selling their business, and there's insurance against your buy-sell agreements. So when you go in to sell your business, that company who wants to buy you wants to make sure that there is no liabilities. And if there is a liability and a claim that comes up in the past, or from something that you sold in the past that happens in the future, there are insurance policies for that too. So if you are looking to sell your business, and you're listening to this podcast, let us know also, because there's also a different type of insurance for that.
Great. That makes a lot of sense. And can I just ask on that one then? Say, for example, that you weren't so much worried about getting sued in the future from the new buyer of the business, and you probably should, but let's assume that you'd put that to one side, or you've dealt with that through insurance. What about the situation where a buyer wants to buy your company, but you didn't have insurance, and you were selling, say, I don't know, pet supplements where your dog could die, or baby clothes or whatever? Can the buyer buy an insurance policy to indemnify themselves and thus enable the deal to go ahead? Is that a kind of situation that you deal with?
Typically, the buyer's going to push that back on the seller to pay for. But yes, there's a buyer side of the insurance policy, and there's a seller side of the insurance policy. But mostly, if I'm going to buy your business, I'm going to make you buy that policy for me. But it's there for either way you want to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it strikes me similar in the real estate market. So we bought a property a while ago where I think they did something petty, like they put wooden flooring in, and they shouldn't have done because it was against the terms of the lease. And they got an insurance policy such that if somebody turned around and said you have to turn it back into carpeted flooring, that would be covered. And that enabled us. Yeah, that was an insurance product, that enabled the deal to go ahead. So we knew that we weren't going to be liable for $20,000 or whatever it was of work in the future, should somebody bothered to turn around and do that. And equally, that the seller actually could sell the property. So it strikes me as a similar thing. It's sort of getting around an issue using insurance as a sort of enabling tool, actually, which seems really cool. So it's good to know that works. And actually, wasn't aware that such a thing existed. As soon as you said it, I thought, oh, it sounds really obvious that it would exist. So that's really good to know about.
I think the biggest thing is having an agent or broker like us that knows what you're doing, that knows the Amazon space, that knows the e-com space, that knows what sourcing is, that knows what drop shipping is, like those types of things that you are doing on a day-to-day basis. A normal mom and pop agent down the road, or these online companies that are popping up all over everywhere saying that you can get a policy for $20, they don't know what you're doing. They don't know how you're sourcing. They don't know your business, and they don't know Amazon. And I think that's the biggest thing that if I could say one thing to your listeners, is make sure you have an agent that knows what you are doing so they can build a policy that protects you the right way. If you know you're going to be selling in a couple of years, your agent needs to know that so we can have, an occurrence policy versus a claims made policy, those types of things. So just be darn sure that you have someone who has your best interest at heart, and not just one of these online companies. Don't risk your livelihood and your business's livelihood for $20 a month. It's not worth it. Yeah,
I would say it's funny how I guess a lot of e-commerce sellers, but because of the nature of the beast, are positive materialists. A bit like my wife. Like if you can't see it or touch it, it doesn't exist. And therefore, because insurance is intangible, it seems like it doesn't matter. Just got to tick that box and move on, as opposed to physical products. But it's the same thing, which is to say, if you buy a product that's lousy because it's cheap, then you're going to get 1-star reviews on Amazon and it all melts down. And equally, if you buy insurance that's cheap and it doesn't cover you, then your business might be unsellable, or you're going to just pay for it later, as you said, with a sort of retrospective insurance policy. So I would say if you think of your business as a product which you want to sell, which a lot of the serious people that I work with do these days, quite rightly, I think, then you just need to not go cheap on your product sourcing. I think it's as simple as that.
Want to be a business, act like a real business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, just the other thing is that mentality that I see a lot, and I think it comes into the insurance area. I've seen quite a lot, along with other things. Can I get away with this? Well, look, if you're just going to do it as a side hustle for a couple of years and then that's it, let it fizzle out, then maybe you can. But if you're actually trying to create a real business, you're going to have more and more exposure to the authorities who might investigate you. As you say, more and more, at risk of being sued, so legal risk. But then also, hopefully you're going to actually want to get properly paid for it. And that's the sale. And at that point, you're going to be poured over by all the lawyers in the world, and they are ruthless people. So yeah, it's the sort of proofing your business against being examined by experts. So obviously, yeah, as you say, you need a broker that knows the Amazon space. You clearly know everything about this area. So if people want to
sleep and breathe Amazon now,
yeah, you're doing the whole thing. My sympathies. I'm in the same boat.
I don't know how you guys do this, but
yeah. So if people want to check out your services, then they go to ecom.insure, I think is the right place.
Correct.
What do you do there? Do you just have a chat to people? Is it just purely
there's
online?
All kinds of information there on the different types of products. You can actually click on the application there. There's a drop down. Do you do private label? Do you not do private label? Do you need workers' comp insurance? All of the different types of products there. And then we also have new that just launched this quarter is our VIP program. Anyone who is a client of ours gets entered into the VIP program, and it has a ton of different resources for third-party sellers that have discounts. So CJ that you talked about, if you're a client of ours, he gives you a $300 off any type of reinstatement services. There's like 60 on there now. We've got 20 more in the making. So every person who is a client of ours gets into this program too, where you're going to get all kinds of discounts with other types of third-party vendors. So that was kind of just our way to thank and on the coverages.
I think we slightly lost your audio there, but it sounds like we've got lots and lots of different sort of bonuses for being a member of your sort of tribe of insurees, as it were. Yeah, that's really smart. And by the way, I should advertise the same thing, because we must have like about 100 sort of such sort of relationships with different service providers like you guys, and we're always offering discounts on the podcast, but I should make sure that my clients know that they can get them as well. So it's a very good point, but that sounds like a very worthwhile thing to have, and people like CJ are really, really worth having in your corner for when things inevitably go a bit funny. So, and I think you've also got a downloadable sort of cheat sheet, info sheets. Yep. Tell us more about that.
That kind of just breaks down the different coverages. So
I know, just remember what it was in it. We can get it at amazingfba.com/insure at INSURE, if you're not sure how to spell insure. And you never know. It always strikes me that I was spelling out simple words. I'm like, yeah, should somebody be selling on Amazon who can't spell the word insure? But you never know. So I'll put it out there. amazingfba.com/insure. And there's a bunch of information about the different types of coverage there. So really informative.
really
kind
sexy,
of sounds
right?
like, yeah, really sexy. I mean, what I think is good is that it's sort of forcing people to just think in a slightly more, what's the word, structured, grown up is the word I use. That's very patronizing, but business-like way. And I think that's really, really healthy. I'm massively in favor of anything that gets people to think about their business in a business-like way, rather than treating it like a side hustle when you're doing $1 million a year. Isn't it no longer the right thinking? So that's great stuff. Are there any other questions that I didn't ask you that I should have?
No, but feel free to reach out to me on Facebook, Ashlin D. Hadden, or just Ashlin D. Hadden's fine. Or you can do Ashlin Protects My Assets is our business page if you would like to reach out there. But feel free to add me on my personal page. reach out anytime with any questions. Put the questions below and I'll hop on here and take a look also. So don't ever hesitate to reach out. We're here for you guys anytime.
Sounds great. Excellent. And I like the fact that you're about protecting the asset. That's really, really good. And the bigger your business is and the more, difficult the environment we operate in is, then I think the more we need to think about protection, not just growth. It's kind of an obsession, growth of revenue. I'm like, yeah, but have you protected that? Are you going to still have that next year? So insurance is part of that policy, isn't it? I like that a lot. Good. Well, look, it's been a pleasure to catch up as always. Making insurance fun. Maybe you should have that as your tagline.
And
it's been good fun. And also, I think a good reality check for quite a lot of people, and particularly about the categories and the minimum insurance, premium number for me is a bit of a wake up call. And that was sort of the canary in the gold mine was in the coal mine rather was my client the other month getting a quote like that. But that sounds like that wasn't an exceptional weird. That's just the standard thing. So that's a real wake up call for me. That's one of my takeaways. So if you're listening, hopefully you got your own takeaways from today, and do reach out to Ashlin, or as you said, comment on any of the Facebook or other posts as well. So just remains for me to say, Ashlin, thank you so much for coming on to the show and sharing your wisdom today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.